Welcome back to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a bold blend of coffee and movie review podcasting. My name is Nick Delaney, and I am your show host, coffee and movie reviewer, and the guy who is not a Disney adult, but quietly enjoys the childlike magic and wonder of a Disney film. In this episode, we are celebrating originality with a review of Disney Pixar's latest film, Elio. We'll be pairing this fresh film with a not-so-fresh discussion of an Americano from Ann's Florist and Coffee Bar in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Everyone, please take a seat, stay a while, and let's talk movies over some coffee. Now, I know that this is now back to being a mainly audio podcast, so you would all not be able to see this, but I'm in a new location. We are in a new recording studio, aka I moved. I'm now in a new bedroom. It happened very quickly. I think I mentioned it on maybe the Blue Velvet episode. I'm not sure, maybe even sooner. I don't know. I feel like it wasn't that soon. But I signed a new lease. I moved. I am still in Washington, D.C. I'm still very close to where I was before. I just moved like 2 neighborhoods over. So I'm in I love the apartment I'm in. I really, really love this new apartment. Even my view that I have while I'm recording right now is lovely. Really, all I can see is power lines and the window across from me, which is very close, by the way. I feel like I could like put out like a ladder and crawl over if I wanted to, if I was in like some high school Forbidden Love movie. But I won't do that. But it's that close that I could do that. The street is lovely and tree-lined. The building I'm in has like character, which is nice. I feel like so many of the apartment buildings in DC are just like that gray aesthetic. I don't know if there's a name for it, but it's like that fake gray hardwood floor, bright LED lighting, white walls, white kitchen cabinets, gray marble countertops, which, you know, is all very nice and everything. And yeah, is good. But I don't know. I like a place with a little bit of character. And this new place definitely has that. There's even a skylight in my living room, which is crazy. And this place is also huge. I feel like Monica and Rachel on Friends. So I'm having a good time. I'm very happy to be in this new place. Wish you could all see it, except I don't know who's listening to this, so I don't know if I would invite all of you into my home, although I'd like to think that I would. Anyways, I moved. I'm in a new location. If there's a slight echo in this room, please forgive me. I still have not hung up anything on my walls, so I feel like my voice is bouncing around everywhere. I also went on vacation. That was fun. It may have been a Disney-related vacation, just dropping that out there, which may be why I'm reviewing a Disney film today, because I was in a Disney-related environment, and it was lovely. I had a fun time. It was fun. It was my sister's graduation trip, so it was fun to celebrate her and her accomplishments. But yeah, that was fun. I have not had time to watch movies lately. I have not been watching any movies. Well, not any, but it's been a lot harder with moving and everything. I don't have internet at my new place yet, so I've not been able to stream anything. So I kind of got down to the wire, and I was like, I feel like I have a lot to say about Elio. We'll just review that. So that's why we're here right now. I really have just been listening to a lot of music and podcasts, a lot, and I've also been reading a lot of books. So something that I thought would be fun, just because it's been a little while and everything, I thought it'd be fun to bring out my coffee table and to talk about just sort of the things I'm currently caught up in. So I'll get into my coffee table. I first would like to discuss music. The major music thing going on in my life right now is the release of Virgin by Lorde. And usually when there is a huge monumental album like that in my life that is released, I would dedicate a whole coffee thought to it, talking about like everything about it, what it means to me, why I like it, all this and that. But Virgin, I don't know. Like, I'm still so blown away by it, and I have no idea what to think. And I feel like usually when I listen to an album for the first time, I have to wrap my head around the production. Like, what am I even hearing sonically? And it takes a long time to get past that. And then I can move on to the lyrics, and then I can move on to the context of the album and like the artist's history and everything. I feel like I'm still stuck on the production of Virgin right now. And I just listened to it. I got the vinyl, the signed vinyl, which my new favorite possession. I got the vinyl and I just listened to it for the first time the other night, and I keep falling in love with it all over again. It's a no skip album. It is 10 out of 10. I know I can say that. I'm having a great time listening to it. My current favorites, I want to say all of them, but that's a dumb answer. Of course, the singles I love. Current Affairs I really like. Broken Glass is one that I repeatedly listen to. And then recently it's been David. David has been a current favorite of mine on repeat. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. Like I said, there are also some podcasts that I'm currently listening to and having a fun time with. As always, The Detective and the Log Lady is giving me everything. It has been such a lovely ride, and it's coming to an end. The show is almost over. They recapped all of Twin Peaks, and next week is the final episode, and I'm really, really sad to see the show go, but all great things must come to an end. I'm glad they're not trying to continue it and make it into something that, I don't know, wouldn't be what it is. But it is sad to see it end, and I wish there was more content with that show. Speaking of that, one of the co-hosts of The Detective and the Log Lady, Stacey Ponder, recently started her own podcast called Final Girl After Dark, which is inspired. It's almost like an adaptation of her blog. She's ran a horror blog for 20 years now, I think. And she is now adapting that blog into like a podcast format. And it's a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun with it. The movies on it, so it's horror movie discussions. The movies on it are all kind of like deep cuts, I feel like. So I'm listening to these not at all knowing what she's talking about, but it is still quite enjoyable. So if you just enjoy horror and, I don't know, reality TV altogether, tune into that. It is a lot of fun. And then I've also been reading a lot. One of my current books that I've been into, I will talk about in the coffee thought, so I'll save it for that. But I'm just starting Crying in H Mart right now. I've never listened to Japanese Breakfast before, so I'm just kind of going into this memoir blind, but I am really, really into this book. It is so beautiful. It is so reflective and profound already. I'm only like 30 pages in and I've already teared up on the metro reading this book. So I'm having a great time with that. And that is pretty much my coffee table. I have not had time to do anything else really. I've not even really been playing video games on my new Nintendo Switch 2, which has been making me sad. But I trust that there will be time once I get settled in and things calm down just a little bit. So enough about me. Let's get into why we are all here. So our first segment is Now Brewing, which is a coffee discussion and review segment. Now Brewing in today's episode is an Americano from Anne's Florist and Coffee Bar. Like I said, I was recently on a Disney-related vacation, and I went to this place because it was nearby where I was. It is located on Las Olas Boulevard, which is a famous, popular street in Fort Lauderdale. It's known for its upscale shopping and dining options, kind of like very boutique, expensive stores, like $80 for a t-shirt store. I did go into one and I saw this button-up shirt I really liked, and that was like $180, which is just never something in my foreseeable future that I would have the money for. even though I just talked about getting a Nintendo Switch too. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. That is like a different price area than this. For a shirt, it's different. It's different. Trust me. So it's located on this really popular street, very bougie street, if I must say. And Anne's Florist and Coffee Bar is described on their website as a, quote, perfect combination of flower shop, coffee house, and wine bar, end quote. And that's pretty cool because this podcast is a perfect combination of coffee house and movie theater, end quote. So it's cool. I love to see coffee mashed up with other things. I think if I ever opened a coffee house, I would do something similar concept at least. So I love to see this place doing that. It's also family owned and operated since 1976, so she's been around. And it started with a love for all things growing. Aw, isn't that sweet? That's sweet. Okay. The atmosphere of the cafe, like I said, it's in a very bougie part of town. So it's very cute, it's very nice, and you can feel that this place is not sort of like it has not been built in the past 10 years. Like this place has seen stuff, it is lived in a good way, It had a nice atmosphere. And it was like the perfect Florida vacation vibe. Like it had those wicker chairs and tables outside and like flowers, of course, on the tables. Yeah, I liked the atmosphere. I did. And the flowers were also all beautiful. Now, moving on to the Americano. I got an iced Americano. I was feeling, this was my afternoon coffee. I just kind of wanted something pick me up, fresh, light. I got an iced Americano, go to standard at any coffee shop. And I knew something was wrong when I said I would like an iced Americano. And he said, "Oh, here you go." Like, what? Where'd you get that? What? Where did that come from? Hello? Is there like a bar underneath the countertop that I can't see that's like making the drinks? It just came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, huh. And of course, it was very cold, too cold. I was like, this was not hot espresso that just had ice and water put in it. This was being chilled somewhere. And I took a sip. Once I got outside, I took a sip. Ashtray. Cat's ass. Yeah, it was the cat's ass. Now, because I am a bit of a fiend and I do enjoy like a charred, bitter cigarette taste. I do enjoy that taste. There was some enjoyment I had drinking this drink. Was it good coffee though? Was this made with any love at all? Absolutely. Gosh darn, not. Hell no. Hell no. If I were to bet, if I were a betting man, there we go. If I were a betting man, now to bet, it makes me think of Dale Cooper, and then I'm thinking about Twin Peaks, and here we are again. Damn. If I were a betting man, I would say that this was a cup of coffee that someone ordered and then ended up not wanting, and it was placed in a fridge for the next unsuspecting victim to order it. Or the other option is that early in the morning before the cafe opens, they quote unquote make Americano into a huge pitcher so that when someone orders an Americano, they just pour it from the pitcher into a cup. Which, if you are a barista or if you know really anything about coffee, you know that does not work. Now, from my time working at the corporate coffee shop that I shall not be naming, The one thing I did learn, I learned a few things actually, but the one thing I did learn was that shots die. Shots of espresso go bad. They cannot be exposed to air by themselves for some amount of seconds. I don't know if it was like 8 seconds or 30 seconds. I know I should know that, but they cannot be exposed to air. They need to be mixed into the drink. They need to be put over ice. Something needs to happen to preserve the flavor. Otherwise, it goes stale. It gets really bitter, and that's how you get that ashtray taste. So I would really hope that Anne's, this coffee place, would know better than to not do that. Because if you were to do that, you are guaranteeing that anyone who orders an Americano at any time is getting this ashtray taste. Now, the other possibility is that it was the laziness of this barista. I appreciate that they were not being wasteful, and like someone said they didn't want their Americano, and they were like, okay, well, I'll save it for the next person that does. But also, I'm paying for a fresh drink. And when the flavor becomes something else, when you do something like that, it is now like, I don't know, I'm not getting what I paid for, you know? So I don't really think that's valid. And so it leads me to believe that this was an issue of laziness if this is the case, which is a shame. It is a shame for a place like this, a historic family-owned and operated establishment, for this barista to ruin the experience. And I guess it is also a shame that my experience was so dependent on the coffee, but it is a coffee house, as well as a flower shop. It is a coffee house. So if I'm going there for the coffee, my experience should be, it should be reasonable for my experience to be based on that. Now, if I get coffee on like my Southwest airplane, it's not reasonable for my entire experience to be based on the quality of the coffee that the flight attendant serves me. Which, by the way, sometimes that airplane coffee is hitting. So it goes to show how even making one drink without love, how even skipping the work on one drink can affect someone's whole experience with your coffee shop. And I think that could be said about a lot of different, I don't know, establishments, businesses, pieces of art even. By cutting out the work, by taking shortcuts like this, you are now leaving your audience, your customer, your whoever, with a bad taste in their mouth. And that's not nice. No one likes a ashtray bad taste in their mouth. So with all of that being said, I'm going to have to give this Americano and Anne's Florist and Coffee Bar the Nicks. Ooh, I know. It's not often that I do that with the coffee, but it must be done. Moving on to the coffee thought, this is an outlet dedicated to voice my many incoherent thoughts over some coffee. What I would really like to talk about today is the book that I just finished and that I am raving over. Again, nothing new. It is a book that is discussed in high school literature classes, I believe. The book is Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I read this book on the vacation I was on, and I have to say what a fantastic time I had with it. I've never seen any of the movies that are based on this book. From what I know, I don't think a lot of them are good. I heard the 1940s one is pretty good. But I almost don't want a movie. My experience with this book was just too good. It just was not quite what I was expecting. I feel like so much imagery in Picture of Dorian Gray is so flowery and beautiful and romantic and like, you know, looking through rose-tinted glasses. And I would say about 100 pages into this 200-page story, it takes a drastic turn and becomes like this grimy, dark, foggy horror story. And I really love the evolution of this story and the character that this story is based on. And I feel like the tone and the atmosphere of the story adapts really well with that character. And I know there's a term for that, like if a character is really sad and it starts raining out, I think it's called pathetic environments or something. Pathetic irony, I don't know, something like that. Um, but I really love how the atmosphere mirrors the story and the decisions that the characters are making. Um, this is just such a cool book to me. It's so ahead of its time. And I feel like it kind of reminds me of Frankenstein almost, which I know is a weird comparison, but bear with me. And so the story starts with an artist, and the artist is basically making his masterpiece, which is the portrait of Dorian Gray. And it's almost like in doing that, this artist is creating a monster, but it's not a monster in the sense that we know of, like not the Frankenstein's monster. It is a monster of beauty, and it's almost like a creation that is so beautiful that it's destructive. And that's like the inciting incident of this book, I feel like. And I really like the parallels between Basil, the artist, and Lord Harry. I feel like I got his name mixed up. I feel like sometimes he was called Lord Harry, other times he was called Lord Henry. I don't know, but basically the other guy who is obsessed with Dorian Gray. And I really like how they're like parallels of one another. And I thought that Harry was a fascinating character. And I really, I'm fascinated by characters that are so clearly horrible people, but sometimes they say something and you're like, damn, they have a point. And it's like within all these awful things they're saying, but then they say something that kind of strikes a chord. It just felt like a very human, a very real character. Really cool. And of course, Basil was an interesting character as well, because although he was the source of kindness and good in the book, he also caused so much of the harm towards Dorian Gray. One weird comparison I drew when reading this book is I kind of realized how similar Dorian Gray is to the character of Fleabag, Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, Fleabag, in that Dorian Gray, this character is someone who has so much of the dark side of humanity thrust on him, and he just kind of shoulders it. And I'm not saying that Dorian Gray is, necessarily like a victim to everything and, he didn't do anything wrong, because I think this character is also just sort of in a gray area, and he takes out, he has a dark side as well. But we see that because he is so beautiful, sort of like these evil forces in life are drawn to him and project that evil on him. So yeah, I had a wonderful experience with this book. Thank you for coming to Coffee Nick's book club. I will stop now, but I recommend this book if you're into kind of like that old literature that's very symbolic and very like beautifully written. Maybe not the easiest to read, but really fun to dissect and learn like character motivations and all that sort of stuff. You will love this book. That is exactly why I loved it, so I highly recommend it. That was a lot of talking. Let's take a break. You're invited to the Coffee House, a free members-only podcast from Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. On off weeks from the main show, join me in discussing themed collections of coffee and movie reviews. Currently, the Coffee House is brewing its first batch, Lynchian Picks, a 10-part series diving deep into the dreamlike world of David Lynch films and black coffee. Membership is free to the Coffee House, which includes all collection episodes. For only $3 a month, you can tip your barista and become a regular tier member, which will grant you access to special bonus episodes, as well as having your name listed in ad breaks just like this one. Speaking of, a special thank you to our first regular, Reese Tunstall, for tipping. If you would like to join, you can do so using the link in the episode notes. Brewing next week on the Coffee House is part 5 of Lynchian Picks, a discussion of David Lynch's Wild at Heart. I will see you there. We are back and we are going to hit the ground running with our Now Showing segment. This is our feature ideological analysis and critical film review segment by yours truly. Now showing in today's episode is Elio. Finding comfort in the possibilities of space, Elio dreams of being abducted by aliens in order to escape his tough aunt, bullies, and the death of his parents. When his dreams come true, Elio finds himself as the chief mediator in an intergalactic conflict. Elio is directed by Adrian Molina, Domi Shi, and Madeline Sharafian. It stars Jonas Kibriab as Elio, Zoe Saldana as Olga, and Remy Edgerly as Glorden. It was released on June 20th, 2025. Okay. This is one of those movies where I feel that I will be talking more about the surrounding context, circumstances, production. I'll just be talking about the discussions being had about this movie more than the actual movie, but I promise I will talk about the movie and I will review it and share my thoughts because that's what this is about. But seeing all of these discussions happening, I felt like I had something unique to contribute and that I wanted my thoughts on this to be a part of this show. So that's why I'm talking about this here. So let's get into that a bit. What is going on with this movie, Elio? So the main thing that you have probably seen is that this film bombed at the box office. The advanced screening of the film received really positive reviews, but when asked at that screening who would actually see the film in theaters, no one raised their hand. The budget for this film was apparently $200 million. And on its opening weekend, just a few weekends ago, it made a measly $20.8 million, which is the lowest opening ever in Pixar history, I believe. A lot of people are crediting this due to the messy production of this film and the fact that it was rewritten from the original vision, that it was delayed a year, all of these different factors. There were some actors that stepped away from the movie and they had to fill in those actors with other ones, lots of different things. So let's take a step further and get into that. So according to insiders who worked on this film, Elio was initially portrayed as a queer-coded character. These insiders specifically cite a scene that was cut from the film where Elio wore a pink tank top he had found on the beach and hosted a trashin show. Trashin like fashion. This is all coming from the Hollywood Reporter article by Ryan Gajewski. It says, quote, "But either way, this characterization gradually faded away throughout the production process as Elio became more masculine following feedback from leadership. Gone were not only such direct examples of his passion for environmentalism and fashion, but also a scene in Elio's bedroom with pictures suggesting a male crush." End quote. I have a lot of feelings about everything I just said. So a character having a passion for environmentalism and fashion, that is not queer. That is not queer. I think that straight people, straight men can also be interested in fashion, environmentalism. You know, I could see where an interest in fashion in our society comes with more feminine perception. But I do not think that because a character is wearing a pink tank top and they're interested in the environment and fashion, that they should be thought of as a queer character. I think that those lead to stereotypes that could be harmful to queer people. I do think that it is important to represent men of all ages in film interested in things that could be deemed more feminine, for example, like fashion, or things that not even feminine, things that are not often seen as masculine. I think it's important for that to be represented, but I think I don't know. It kind of concerns me. It worries me I question it a bit when we're saying a character wearing a pink tank top and interested in the environment, that is that means a character is queer. I think it's harmful to queer people, to gay men, and I also think that is harmful to straight men. Because what about straight men who are also interested in those things? And what about, I don't know, gay men who are not? I don't know. It's just, those are stereotypes. These comments are based on stereotypes. Now, the part with pictures hanging in Elio's room suggesting a male crush, that's a different story. When it comes to that, there's a can of worms sitting here that we could open and we could talk about. And that can of worms is what it means to have a love interest for a character who is 11 years old. And this is something that Disney is not a stranger to. In a majority, I think it's safe to say, a majority of their films where the main character has a love interest, I would be willing to say that that main character is a minor. So I honestly do not think the critiques of this film are valid in saying that, oh, this film cannot be about love interests or it cannot be about attraction because this film is about a child. I think it's unreasonable to think that children do not have crushes. I mean, think about like your kindergarten crush you had on the playground. And it's also unreasonable to think that Disney has never had a love interest for a character who is a child. So it is very disappointing to hear that Disney, Pixar, potentially cut a storyline for this character just because this character, their crush, was of the same gender. Because this is something that in a lot of Disney Pixar films is not the case. And I think that when it is two characters of the same gender, no matter what their age is, people inherently see it as sexual for some reason. But if this character were to have a crush on a girl, it would be seen as like cute, innocent, young love, like that kindergarten crush that I just referenced. But when it is a love interest of the same gender, it becomes seen as sexual for some reason. I also think to say that any queer subtext was cut from this film is discrediting a lot of what was in this film. I'll talk about this later when I talk about the actual contents of this movie, but I think that this film still managed to operate as a queer text for so many reasons. So I don't like just the general blanket statement that like anything queer was cut from this film when there is a subtext here that works really well in that respect. But like I said, it is disappointing that the more overt queer plot lines of this movie were cut and that all we have to rely on is subtext, are things that are not explicit, you know? And Disney has shown that they can do this before. I mean, Luca is a movie that I think was more overt in its queer tones. So I don't know why they weren't comfortable like doing that or even something that goes a bit farther than that. So there was also an advanced screening that happened for this film, and the advanced screening received really positive reviews. People really enjoyed this, but when asked who would see this in theaters, no one raised their hand. The original director, Adrian Molina, who did Coco, he left the project shortly after this screening, after receiving feedback from the higher-ups, I guess, which is when the two current directors came onto the project and it was reworked. A lot of the things that Adrian Molina had in the film was cut. And it's rumored that Molina went on to work on Coco 2 at this time. The film was also delayed a year at this point to when it was released now, and it opened with its $20.8 million. I really think this part's interesting, and I want to discuss this. The advanced screening received really positive reviews, but when asked who would see this in theaters, no one raised their hand. I think it's really interesting what is happening to good original movies right now. I think that people still like original movies. They still like good original movies, but it's almost like people aren't willing to go out of their way anymore to see those films. Like what will get people in theaters is something that they know, like Inside Out 2 or a prequel or whatever, some sort of IP film. That is the only thing that people are willing to go get their butts off the couch, go to the theater for, pay for a ticket and everything. I think this advanced screening, these people, they'd be willing to watch it on Disney Plus, but that's it. So I feel like people are starting to have a much shorter fuse when it comes to original films. And I think that this is really disappointing. If we start to go to the theater just for sequels and prequels and spin-offs, then that's all we're going to see at the theater. And all these great original films we won't be able to watch there anymore. I think I don't know. It's just stupid to me. And then it gets to the point, like, what are we going to be watching? Inside Out 12? Return of Bippity Bop or whatever that big pink thing's name is? I don't know. Like, we have to make original movies at some point. We have to go to the theater and support these original movies at some point if we want sequels, if that's what people want so much as a sequel. I don't know, just a little side tangent I had. One conversation happening in regards to this film, I actually did not know anything about this until I did research for this recording, but a lot of critics are pinning the failure of the film on its, quote, bean mouth art style, end quote. This is from a CBC article by Jackson Weaver. It says, quote, "Nobody wants the bean mouth style of character design," wrote one reader when commenting on a post-mortem of Elio's bombing by the website Cartoon Brew. "It feels lazy, overused, and unoriginal. More than that, it's become synonymous with an almost vitriolic hatred for a particular and supposedly ubiquitous art style. Animation journalist John Mayer calls it a pejorative and insult that far outstrips the style's reach and misunderstands its origin." End quote. I don't think those were Jackson Weaver's thoughts directly. He was citing all these other journalists, I guess, or people who thought they had something to say about the art style. I think that this is far too much. I think that this is intense. Okay, so bean mouth art style, what is that talking about? It's talking about this style that sort of oversimplifies human designs. It makes people look very like it's a small world. Face shapes are very round, colorful, sort of cutesy, and they have the bean shaped mouth. Think like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, sort of like that. Very colorful. All the characters are very rounded. And although they might be in realistic looking environments, the humans are not designed in a realistic way. And okay, I do think that this is an art style that Pixar specifically has been over relying on. If you look at Luca, Turning Red, even their recent Disney Plus original series that they did, I think it's called Win or Lose. All of this is designed in the bean mouth art style, which I didn't even know was a term until this recording. So I do think that they are doing this too much. I would like to see more diverse art styles from them. But do I think this is a lazy, maybe overused, unoriginal art style? No, I don't. I think that this is a beautiful art style, and I think crediting this film's failure to that art style is not fair, and it's just objectively wrong. I do not find this art style pejorative or an insult. That is simply my opinion, my perspective. I guess someone else might be able to. This person, John Mayer, certainly did. Not the John Mayer. This is John Mayer with an H in Mayer. And I don't know, if I don't feel that way, it's hard to imagine that the general audience feels that way, that they are so disgusted by this art style that they refuse to go see this movie in theaters. I don't think that's the case. And I think that the proof is in that screen test that I was talking to before, the advanced screening, where everyone said they really liked the movie, but just no one seemed to be interested in seeing it in theaters for some reason. So, but I thought this was just an interesting article. It's interesting that someone is crediting the failure to that. I would love to see Pixar do be more original with its art styles moving forward, but I do not think that that is to blame in this film's failure. I have noticed that it seems the animation film industry is latching on to like specific successes too much. I think of Into the Spider-Verse and how successful that movie was critically and also with commercial audiences. And how after that film, there were several animated projects that had a very similar art style. I think about the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I think about even the new Puss in Boots movie kind of had like that similar art style, I think. And yeah, that art style is amazing. It's great, but after a while, yeah, it does get overused and I want to see something else. But am I going to refuse to see a movie and be disgusted because it's in that art style? No. It's still a beautiful movie. It's still a really great movie. What I would credit this movie's failure to, if I had to pin it on something, is simply marketing. I don't really think that the marketing team gave a lot of people a reason to go watch this in theaters. I also think that based on the trailer, this film is very similar to Lilo and Stitch, which watching the movie, it's not. This is not similar to Lilo and Stitch, but watching the trailer, it is. And this has been a very Lilo and Stitch every year. I feel like they did go really hard on the marketing for Lilo and Stitch, and a lot of people got in the theater for that film. Um, so maybe people weren't feeling as motivated to go see another movie about a boy dreaming about space. So maybe it's that it's too similar to Lilo and Stitch. I just don't think the trailer for this movie also represented it as well as it could have. Um, I heard from a few people how much they hated the trailer. I didn't hate it, but yeah, I think that this film is really great. I really loved this movie. I yeah, I just don't think we were given a great reason up front to go see it. They didn't give us that why soon enough. Pixar actually fired back at critics of the film in an Instagram reel, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. And although that the reel had a comedic tone, it was following a trend and everything. It was very explicit in what it said. Basically, the reel said, quote unquote, "Stop complaining that Disney doesn't make original stories if you don't show up to the movie theaters and support them in the first place." Now, I think that this reel is cute and funny, but it is weird for Pixar to pin this on audiences, to blame audiences. I mean, Disney Pixar is a huge company. This is a reputable, just, I mean, Pixar is like the gold standard when it comes to animation. So it's really weird and off-putting to me for Pixar to blame this film's failure on their audiences. Like I said, they're the gold standard. They should know what they're doing. They should know how to market a film. They should know how to give people a reason to go to the theater and see a movie. Or they should be making movies that attract people to the theaters naturally. And I would like to say that this movie does that, but I guess it doesn't. All of those things considered, it's very strange to me that they are pinning this on audiences, even if it is in a comedic tone. I think that it's not quite professional for a company of their status to be doing. They should know better. I think that that was corny of them. I do agree with it, though. I think that people should stop complaining that Disney doesn't make original stories if they are not going to actually go watch the original stories. I think a lot of the people that complain about that are ones who will watch the trailer and be like, no, I don't like it, and not even give this movie a chance. Okay, I've done so much discussing on the circumstances and the production and the conversations around this movie. I think it's time to actually talk about the movie. As you could probably figure by now, I really liked this movie. I did go to this movie after I had a liquor tasting. So I was a little tipsy when I saw this, but I'm doing a review on it. I feel like I was there enough to be receptive and to have, I don't know, well educated thoughts and opinions. But I really loved this movie. And I want to say first that this honestly did remind me of old Pixar. It kind of it has that like the wit, the cleverness, the heart, the emotion, the impact, and it also has commentary. It has a subtext going on underneath it, which I think is what separates Pixar movies from just your standard like Disney movies. So, like I said, there is heart and emotion, heavy heart and emotion here. And a lot of this is based on the dynamic between Elio and his aunt Olga. Very early on in the movie, we learn that Elio's parents passed away in an accident. His aunt Olga has to take care of him. Olga is in the military. I believe she works for the Space Force unit. And she is not at all, she says this in the movie, she is not at all ready to accept a kid in her life. She doesn't know the first thing about raising a kid or having a working relationship with a kid. Um, and we see that in the film. There are a lot of conflicts and struggles between Elio and Olga. Olga is very tough. She's very grounded in reality. And Elio, he finds comfort in the thought that there's life out in space, that he is not alone. So he is constantly obsessing and dreaming over space. And you probably saw this in the trailer, he even goes out to the beach and like basically begs for aliens to abduct him. He is just alien obsessed. Eventually, Olga gets really fed up with this and sends Elio away to a boot camp to kind of wipe him away of these childish ideas and these ideas that have gotten him into trouble and everything. Now, I referenced this earlier. This is where I think this film was not completely erased of its queer subtexts. I think that there is still something happening here. Elio is a very eccentric child who was sent to a camp so that eccentricity could be erased and Olga could come back, pick up Elio, and now have this convenient life where she, I don't know, doesn't have to worry about Elio causing a scene or turning heads or anything. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like it could be a parallel to, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a stretch. Maybe it's not. Um, and look, I know that this story is about a child, but it is often children who get sent to not only boot camps, but conversion camps. And, you know, subtext is subtext. And the point of it is that it is not actual, it is applicable. So you can interpret what you would like from this. If it is not what you would like to interpret, then so be it. So, while at boot camp, Elio gets bullied and chased off by these two guys. And whilst that happens, he is abducted by aliens. And these aliens think that Elio is the leader of Earth, and they task him with mediating this intergalactic conflict. While all of that is happening up in space, the Intergalactic Council, or whatever their official name was, send a clone of Elio back down to the boot camp. Olga goes to pick up the clone, and the clone is like everything that Olga would want, I guess, like a very just robotic, no personality, people pleaser, neutral, completely neutral Elio. And I really liked this choice, and I found it interesting because I started to enjoy the what we were seeing on Earth much more than what we were seeing in space. And I think that's a sign of good writing. Like I started to find that more interesting than like the fantastical side of this film. So Olga becomes very uncomfortable that Elio is no longer himself and realizes that she should have been more accepting of who he is and that she actually enjoyed Elio for his eccentricities and who he was. Now, while Elio is up in space, the real Elio, navigating this intergalactic conflict, he comes across Glorden, who is the son of the space warlord who is causing this conflict and threatening war. Elio uses Glorden as a bargaining chip, and while they spend time together, Elio and Glorden bond, and Elio learns a lot more about Glorden's alien species and their culture, and he learns that this race of aliens, they all are in these huge mechanical like war suits, but on the inside they're all these like soft slug creatures, and that at a certain age all of the kids are forced to put on these huge suits and never take them off. And if they're ever taken off, it's a sign of weakness. So there's obviously some subtext of like vulnerability and coming of age happening here. And also like erasing the childlike nature or the personality from these children. So there is a metaphor going on here with the armor. And I think it's really interesting because later on in the film, Glorden's dad comes out of the armor. And at that point, him and Glorden start to bond. And Glorden's dad says, apologizes to Glorden and realizes he was wrong. And he becomes vulnerable once he steps out of the armor. And at the same time, the real Elio is reunited with Olga. And Olga, like I said, is in the Space Force. The whole movie, she's wearing a military uniform. And once Glorden's dad takes off the suit of armor, Olga also sort of takes off her military uniform and she's just wearing that first layer, like it's like a tank top in her military pants. Almost like she is shedding her armor. She is becoming more vulnerable. In the film, we also learn that Olga has a hidden obsession with alien life and has a dream of going to space. And she covered up and neglected these dreams because she thought they were childish. She put on this armor, she put up these walls. Much like Glorden's dad, she put up these walls and she put up this armor to make herself come across as very tough. And in the end, Elio teaches her to be more vulnerable, even if it's at the expense of being seen as strange or childish. So for those reasons, I do see a queer subtext operating underneath the surface here. I think that there is something about acceptance in this film. This character, this young boy, is taken to a camp with the hopes that who he is will be changed and he will come back as this more people pleasing, hegemonic person. And when he is picked up and he does come out like that, it's scary for the character of Olga. And she's like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, I've lost Elio. So Olga's character I thought was really interesting because she has to learn to accept Elio's eccentricities and who he is. And in doing so, she is also able to live her truth a little bit more, and she's able to be more vulnerable and express her interests, her fascinations, her dreams, even if they come across as childlike. And this is all paralleled with Glorden and his dad. And Glorden's dad is able to be a loving father, and he's able to shed this very tough atmosphere and be the dad that Glorden wants him to be. And Glorden's able to not have to play a part in this really ridiculous tradition of like putting on this armor and everything. So I just really like the subtext here. I like the commentary. I think it was very heartwarming and moving. I did cry a lot during this, especially when Glorden's dad came out of the armor. I mean, it was just like two slugs hugging each other, and I was like, oh my God, like so moved. And then the character of Elio himself, I really like his story as well. I feel like he also just leads this kind of independent narrative in the film that doesn't have to do with Glorden or Olga, of course. And in the very beginning, he is a character who feels very isolated and alone, which is why his comfort in space becomes so prominent, because he hears something saying that we're never really alone. Like, there is life out there. You're not alone. So that's what builds his obsession and everything. And in this film, he learns that there is an entire community in space that is looking out for him, and even on Earth, there are people out there for him. And although the Earth feels very isolating at times, it's a huge world, and there's people out there that have your back and everything. So I don't know, just a very beautiful story about isolation, acceptance, vulnerability, the importance of all those things. And it was just told in that classic Pixar way that is very effective and moving. And I'm going to say it, I loved the art style. I thought that this was a beautiful movie. I chuckled a couple of times, but the main attraction to me was this just moving story. For all of those reasons, I'm going to give Elio the Nick pick. While discussions surrounding Elio feel like navigating an intergalactic conflict or asteroid field, I strongly feel that the film itself is original, captivating, and heartwarming. Coupled with its clever commentary on vulnerability, or lack thereof, isolation, and acceptance, Elio goes to the great lengths that you would expect from classic Pixar, while still managing to deliver something unique. This film deserves critical and financial success, and it's a shame that the messy production and poor marketing abducted ticket sales. With all of that being said, go see this movie in theaters. Please do not wait for Disney Plus. Do not be that person. Send a message with your money that you like original films. Go to the movie and watch this. It is so important. I know all original films are kind of struggling right now, but especially animated original films, any animated film is struggling, but animated original films are just such an uphill battle, it seems. If you care about film, if you care about animation, send a message with your money. Go pay and watch this. Go on a Tuesday when the tickets are cheaper and go see this movie. It's a fun time. Like the advanced screening, everyone enjoys this movie. Like, this is a good movie, but no one is going to see it, and it's causing all of this bad press that is not deserved. Maybe some of the production stuff, that some of the production stuff is messy, and I am disappointed in some things I learned in that production. But this review, this discussion about the film itself, I base it off of what I saw on screen and nothing else. And I thought that this was a fantastic movie just based on what I saw on screen alone. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening so much. I have not done Dear Coffee Nick in such a long time, and I would like to do that. So if you would like to send in a letter that includes just your random opinions, movie reviews, thoughts on different coffees, or just anything you would like to say, send that in. Send that in. You could do it on social media, or you could write to coffeenicksmoviepicks@gmail.com. I would really love that. Again, thank you everyone for listening to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Before you go, be sure to follow at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and at Coffee Nick on Blue Sky. There you can stay up to date on everything about the show. Join the show's free Patreon page using the link in the show notes and listen as I discuss David Lynch films every other week. If you like what you heard, please rate the show on your podcast app of choice and share the show with your friends. A special thank you to Nathan Moore for creating the show's opening and closing themes. Until next time, I'm not an economist, but I do know that your best bet against financial ruin is a side ponytail.